Hello and welcome into the SorareData Football Strategy Show. I'm Andrew Laird. You can find me as Lairdinho on Sorare. Joined as always by Sean Newsham, PSU fans too. Today, talk about a topic that Sean and I literally have not discussed at all. I don't even know if he knows what the topic is. Usually, I tell him late, and I didn't even tell him this time. Sean, do you know what we're talking about today?
Yep. I mean, I can see it there. I saw the thumbnail about 20 minutes ago, so I do know what the topic of conversation is today. It's actually a pretty reasonable one. I think we've talked about it before to some extent, but like not fully talked about it. I know some people will be upset about things, and then others will not be upset about things. But I think it's a decent topic to have because there's a lot of people that struggle to perceive their gallery and just what in general, like what competing is and like what they're trying to do with stuff.
Yeah, and I think some people have unrealistic expectations of like how much they're actually competing.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to like title it basically, because I think there's competing as if like, oh yeah, I have a lineup, I'm competing. And it's like, well, there's competing like that. And then there's like, I actually am trying to win, like
Correct.
first place or podiums or whatever it is. And so that is something I think it's worth talking about. Thank you to everybody for joining us. Ron Romero came in 90 minutes. Actually, that's 2 hours, 2.5 hours early, 2 minutes before our regular time. So thank you to everyone for coming to a different time. I think it's just for this week. I had some stuff going on. But there are a bunch of people in the chat. I'm not going to go through all of them because you all know you're here. But thank you to everyone for coming in. If you guys could please hit the like button on the video. I'm only going to point one out. Sebastian says, rule number one, if you want to compete, don't trust looking up with Laird recommendations, which is a pure shot at Harry Trades and Sam Ty and not me, because I don't actually make any picks.
Well, let me just help him throw in a 1B then. To also compete, make sure you avoid Laird and the guys that he's going to give his kiss of death to during the week.
That's fair. Yeah. I think that's literally a fair comment given all of that.
Bene has a great comment as well. I think that's a pretty accurate one. I'll let you read that.
Which one?
Bene96's comment.
I'm not going to read that one.
Yeah, I think you should read that, Larry. I think it was meant for you to say, but he's letting everyone know that I'm the GOAT, which I mean, true. Also,
I just have to submit that as an offensive comment.
Oh, my bad. And then Good Place wants to know if the typo is on purpose. Did you mean to do competing versus compting?
Yeah, I think everybody really underestimates the value of commenting. And that's why we have to talk about it, Sean. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we got to know what it is.
Yeah,
so, yeah, it should be a good show. Definitely a good topic. I think we'll be able to hone in on some things.
Tuggy got this. We found Sean's burner account. It's Bena96.
I mean, hey, some people just have great minds, you know?
And then there's someone like Bena96. Anyway. Johanathan says if you want to compete, you just spend more money. There absolutely is part of that.
So Johanathan, I saw your tweet, and I would also like to add that knowing what you're doing also is an important part of the spend more money thing. Like, just if you spend more money, that just doesn't always work unless you spend a lot of money. You also have to throw in like a splash of having a clue of what you're doing and what your concepts are, and that is part of the idea as well. Because if you just throw money at it's not going to work.
I actually think that's important. And I think people just generally think if I have one player and I find one that I think is better and he's more expensive, I should just go get that guy because he's better. Like there are ways to spend more money that are beneficial and ways that you can spend more money that are not. And we prefer beneficially spending money as opposed to, I don't know what the opposite of benefit is.
Correct.
But whatever it is, spending more money by itself is not the answer.
Correct. You have to actually spend money with the idea of what you're doing.
Part of the answer, correct. But anyway, I don't know why I wanted to talk about this topic, because maybe it's one that I've been thinking about a while. It's absolutely something that I thought about a while ago I think it comes right when you like start to win rewards and like early in your Sorare experience, and maybe you don't have a ton of cards and you play Well, now you play like capped or you play all-star, and like let's say you win like 2 or 3 Asia cards, and you're like, oh, maybe I should just buy 2 more and I can compete in Asia. And you realize that after you buy those 2, the extra ones or the 3 extra ones, you're like, man, the 3 cards I bought and the 2 tier 5 cards that I got previously are not really paying off. And I think one of the things I wanted to get into today was, how do you end up starting to decide to compete maybe in a new competition? And then at what point is it better to branch out to others? I don't even want to say progress, because that it's like same line progression. But at what point are you like, this is a good enough team where I can compete regularly, and now I'm going to go try to get some challenger cards or whatever it is? Because I think a lot of people, to their detriment, kind of branch out too quickly purely because they have the cards, meaning like they've won them, or like, oh, this guy's cheap, I'll go get him. And so those are kind of the thought processes that I wanted to discuss today, just because I feel like there are a lot of people who are submitting, 10 lineups when really they should be submitting like 2. And I think part of it is, oh, I have these cards, I'll just do it so I can compete there. But it's kind of to your detriment because you're not really competing.
Yeah. So Blue Tomatoes, there are two comments that I think we'll discuss in further. And then I'm going to ask Laird a serious question. Then we can even get into what the thumbnail is about. So Blue Tomatoes asks, would you define competing as having a serious shot at a podium? We're going to discuss that. There is different terms for competing. Some people are competing for podiums. Some people are competing for ETH. Some people are competing for a card. So there's different variations of competing, and not every lineup you're putting in, you're expecting to compete with. And ZM Star said, what do you think the cutoff is for actual competing, winning tier 2 or better is? And then we'll talk about that. Because here's the thing that people don't understand is, like, one lineup, 1 week might be a competitive lineup, and you could be like, this is a lineup that is trying to compete. And then that same lineup the next week is not a competitive lineup, and you're not trying to compete with that lineup. So like Laird, so I had this weekend 46 lineups. 43 were non-academy. How many do you think I think were competitive? And by my definition of competitive, I mean like tier 1 or better type cards. So similar to what ZM Star was talking about.
So I'm actually surprised. Maybe it's because of the new tiers, but I was actually surprised that, like, not that I think that you submit 15 lineups each week that you're like, I think I can podium with these. Maybe it's 5, whatever the number is. But I was a little interested to hear like what you decided was what your level of competition is.
Well, so here's my thing is, like, I'm not trying to get so we have a lot of guesses: 4, 6, 7, 8 to 10, 6, 5 to 7. I would say 15 of my lineups are competitive. But here's the thing. So, and that people, this is going to rile some people up, Laird, and you know it's going to be. Nanzo said having the cards is only half the battle if you want to compete. It's very true. If you don't know what to do with your cards, it doesn't really matter what you have. And we'll talk about that, because Laird and I actually played one player the same in U23 Rare Pro. And most people will be like, oh my God, you're playing this guy in U23 Rare Pro. And we will talk about why we played him there. And our answers are probably different to why we played them there. Whereas like my answer is probably like, he was my best U23 defender option, and Laird's was like, I don't really have any options, and this was the guy that I'm going to play, because he was a good matchup too. It's true. So here you go, Laird. We want to know what's going to, you ready for the, this is going to rile people up comment?
Sure.
If you want to know how many rare lineups and limited lineups I have ever made that are competitive?
I don't know what that means.
How many rare and limited lineups do I make thinking that I'm going to get a tier 1 with or better?
Like each game week or like ever?
Whatever method you want to use.
I don't even know how to answer that question. It seems like
0. Any lineup I'm throwing in rare or limited, I'm not expecting to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was not. That's not what I was. Okay.
And ZM Star and Nanzo.
I was thinking rares like that included like Rare Pro and all this stuff.
No. Yeah. I just meant straight rare. So Nanzo and ZM Star both said 0 before I threw it out there. It's true. If you are entering a rare or limited lineup, I don't care if you have the best 5 cards and you're throwing out like Kimmich, Messi, Mbappe, whoever in goal, whoever at deep league. It doesn't matter. You're just not competing for a top end spot. Sure, you're going to get some because you just will randomly get high end rewards or decent end rewards regardless. Like if you're throwing out like non-competitive lineups like that per se over and over again, you're going to get some at times. But I'm not sitting there looking at my rare lineup and thinking, yeah, this is getting a top 10 that week. Whereas like I'll look at my rare pro lineups and I'm like, yeah, this is a top 20 lineup a lot of the time. So it's a situation where there's certain lineups that I think are very competitive and very more like you're just throwing lineups in.
So I think there's a little bit of a chicken and the egg part of that, at least with your rare. I mean, it's probably both. But because of the number of entries, particularly in limited, but also in rare that we're still seeing, there's so many lineups that in order to get like a top 10, you just have to have a perfect week. I mean,
I don't think I've got a tier 0 in limited in a year.
I mean, I got one a month ago and I don't even play limiteds anymore.
I mean, that's like.
Yeah. So, but I think I am actually going to take limiteds out of this. I'm going to focus more on the rare because like Nanza said, it's a crapshoot in rare and limited. So the only reason why I think it's different is because you have an opportunity, if you wanted to put your best rares in rare lineups. Like you could take them out of rare pro. So you're like choosing to make those lineups worse because you're prioritizing rare pro, which I think is the right move. Like absolutely, certainly with your gallery.
But counterpoint to that, literally last week or 2 weeks ago in All-Star Rare, I ran a Zenit stack with Kurjakov, Santos, Wendell, and Malcolm with Carlos Gil rare. Like, how much better can I realistically make that lineup, right? Like, that's a really good lineup. But I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, it is what it is. Now, that said, if everyone starts ripping off hundreds, okay, then I'll be more interested in it. But, like, it's hard to get a much better lineup than that in a given week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the funny things that I was going to pull like a Usual Suspects, the greatest trick that Devil ever pulled, was Sorare adding ETH to All-Star Rare and making everybody think that they could get it.
Yeah.
And it's even that is like still very hard to do.
I've
like,
hit
forget
it
about top 10s. Like
I've hit it a couple times, I think, the top 100 in rare, but like I'm trying to get it. Like I'm trying to go to it. But like even when I hit it, like I think last weekend I hit it. And I'm just like out there trying to get my ETH. But I also am acknowledging like I'm not I guess maybe it wasn't last weekend, but like I am trying to get it. 2 weekends ago, I got 40th in All-Star Rare. I put up 411 points. I put Odysseus and Grimaldo there. Vonnekin, Octavio, and Noah Lang. The average was like 75 a player. Or it was like 75. I averaged like 75 a player, and I finished 40th and did not get a tier 1. So it's just a point.
It's hard.
What? It's hard.
It's hard. Yeah.
So, like, I think, so if you are playing that, people get very upset because they're like, I'm competitive in rare and limited. I'm trying to win cards. Nobody is competitive in rare and limited. Like there's maybe nobody to win like a podium spot.
Thank you. Okay.
People are upset they're not getting a podium or a tier 0. But like realistically, if you're playing rare or limited, you are playing to get a card, which is fine. Like, but you need to have the expectations of like, I'm entering this lineup, I'm hoping to win a card. Not I'm entering this lineup, I'm expecting to get a podium, because it's not a realistic expectation. I don't even know if I've podiumed All-Star Rare in over 2 years on the platform. I don't even know if I've podiumed All-Star Rare. Maybe on midweek or something. I don't think I've done it on a weekend. What's funny is I actually got like 5th.
One of us has.
One of us has won it? Did you win it?
That's how I got Carlos Gil.
Well, so all right, make the story better. I finished 5th and got Carlos Gil.
Yeah, well.
That's how I got my Carlos Gil as well.
The worst part of that experience was everyone talking about like Zora, he was not at Sora at the time, tweeting like congrats on your Neymar back when like that I would have absolutely lost it if I had won a Neymar. And then I won Gil. Like I was actually like disappointed, which is like a bummer to feel disappointed getting Carlos Gil. But anyway, it was a summer.
I could never have that happen.
Jonathan B I don't want to go into this specific question, but he said, I'm looking to get into U23s for the summer. So look at U23 Rare Pro instead of U23. Like U23, I think, is one that a lot of people get into because they happen to have U23 players and they don't realize how competitive it is until it's too late. Like they've already gotten the cards.
Well, to Jonathan's question, if you literally ask either of us any question, your question is, should I go into Rare or Rare Pro? Literally, we are never going to tell you to go into Rare ever, because it just does not make sense. If you're trying to compete for a high end reward, so like if you're out there and you're like trying to scrape a tier 5 or whatever, and you're happy if you get a tier 5 every couple weeks or something, like that's fine. And like by all means you should be. I remember like when I first came on the platform, any card I won was super exciting. So if you were at a point where you still get excited about winning a tier 4, tier 5 card, and that's like a good week for you, do it. Like go get those cards. Like that if that makes you excited, don't, trust me, I think Laird would agree with me if I tell you, like, the game is a lot less dull or a lot less fun when you literally like finish like second and get Carlos Gil, or when you win a division and get Carlos Gil and you're disappointed. Like that is not fun. So if you can get yourself to enjoy the platform by winning like tier 4s, tier 5s, and you win something, do that. It's way more enjoyable and will be way more enjoyable for you long run than it is to sit there and expect to get podiums, and then when you get it, you're disappointed with the result.
There is something about the Sorare experience where like you open a reward and it's like somebody you've never heard of. And it's a real bummer when it's someone you've never heard of and it's a tier 0 or tier 1.
Mike Baston just posted a question. I need to follow up with this because it's important, because Carlos Gil. So Mike Baston said, props to Carlos Gil's match awareness, getting suspended while knowing he'll be out injured. Was that his 5th yellow to get a suspension, Mike? Because if so, brilliant move. And I'm glad that he will at least have like a week off for that. It was a good idea by the main man, Carlos.
Yeah, they have some weird thing where I'm not sure he can just serve it while he's injured.
No, you can. You can. It's the same thing. Do you remember in Spain when what's his name got a yellow? He like was injured and was on like the suspension limit and took his jersey off on the field while he was laying there injured, so he got a yellow.
I don't.
It was Aspas.
It was like something Neymar would do before Mardi Gras.
No, Iago Aspas was like, he got injured, and as he was laying there like getting treatment, he like took his jersey off so he could serve his suspension while he was injured. Yeah.
Okay. Joe P says the scores at the top of America Rare versus America Rare Pro this week prove why Rare Pro is so much better. And let's see what that's all about. I will say that we did graphics for a long time that if you like usually the points to win rewards, particularly higher end rewards, are lower in Rare Pro. It's not all the time. And it's not something that you can be like, you can regularly plan, but it does happen because people end up playing, let's see, 435, 415, and 406 for the podium spots in Champion America Rare Pro. And Rare is 456, 424, and 406.
Well, but
Black, look at that.
Oh, no, Andy Black also won America D2.
Really?
Yeah. His St. Louis won 5-0, Laird.
Yeah, that helps, I'm sure.
Yeah, St. Louis won 5-0. So like of course Andy Black's gonna make that happen.
And that's all without the collection score bonus.
Correct. So Bene asks a good question. Bene is just on fire today. He gets commenter of the stream award today for sure. And he asked, what does it take to move a squad from Rare to Rare Pro? And this is why technically nothing. But this is why like people I think struggle and they just play Rare because they're just playing Rare. It doesn't usually take that much to move a lineup from All-Star Rare to All-Star Rare Pro, or like any Rare to All-Star or any Rare Pro. And because you're typically, ZM Star also with a good comment and the answer being money, which is valid. ZM Star is valid. But like typically you can find guys that are not super expensive that are comparable and upgrades over like what you had. And it's not a significant pump, especially at this price, at this point where things are. Bounty asks, can all rares compete in Rare Pro? The answer is no, but it goes to our compete versus competing thing. Like if you do it, you're fighting for tier 4s, tier 5s. And if
yes,
well,
you
I
can do
guess
it.
you like
You can try to compete. Yeah, sure.
right. You're out there trying to scrape a card at some point. Whereas if you have super rares, you are more likely to be competing for higher end cards and higher end rewards, which is obviously what most people are going for. And I know that we do not mention him very much anymore due to Tuggy being Tuggy, but Tuggy has a Sanfrecce Hiroshima stack that it has a little bit of injuries right now. But like what I tried to explain to Tuggy when we were talking about it and what we go to is like some people are like, he has a Sanfrecce stack, that's horrendous, yada, yada, yada. That is a lineup that can compete to win every week. Like every week, especially weeks where they have really good matchups, that is a lineup that you could, if Tuggy came in on a Tuesday and is like, I want a tier 0, I'd be like, yeah, I buy it. Whereas like other people are running lineups and you're just like throwing cards out there that just aren't good enough to win. And it's like, yeah, that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that like stacking probably makes more sense in those situations, like moving from rare to rare pro, like it's a little easier. I guess it's easier. It's not necessarily easier to like play, not necessarily easier to win. I know Nanzo is not like a big stacker normally, but
Germ mentioned, he said, unless it's a perfect week, you'll be kicking yourself if you don't just throw it in rare. I actually disagree. I think you'll be kicking yourself if you didn't have a couple super rares.
Yeah, who was it? Hachini said, and I think this is really important because this is different than the last time we talked about it, because we've done a show about this, about literally moving from rare to rare pro. It was a while ago, and like so rare, things change over time. But the price of super rares, because of the threshold, like the separation between rares and super rares is getting bigger. And so it's not as easy financially to move to like get a few more super rares that pay off, but generally they're still available.
It's still not like outlandish. Like you can find certain spots that like it's not wildly different, I guess. Like you can still find guys that are 3 or 4x. The guys that are actually the most impacted are guys that are like fringe, like capped mode type players. Those guys have a wider range. If you go above that, those guys are typically not like 6 to 8x a lot of the time. Some are, but like a lot of those guys are not like 6 to 8x. It's the guys that are like 50 type average, like threshold type players.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. The Jerome was saying his comment was for rare pro and rare.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that people wouldn't be kicking themselves because they didn't play the rare. I think people would be kicking themselves because they didn't have the super rares instead.
I gotcha. ZM Star says another one. Can a 240 rare cap team be able to win something by swapping in 2 super rares for rare pro? I don't know what that means actually, now that I've read it out loud.
Yeah, I don't.
I would love cap 240 pro where we can play super rares and rares together.
You would like that. That is valid.
Yeah. Just give it to me.
I would like that too. It'd be good.
Yeah, of course.
Nanzo said winning is not always competing. You can win a pot with 7-2 offsuit. That doesn't mean you have a competitive hand. That's correct. Like you can every week you're going to see lineups that are like you look at the lineup and you're like, this lineup is not that good. But over the long run, that lineup is typically not going to be very good. Whereas the lineups that are actually built to compete week in, week out are that good. Then you're like, this lineup's going to win very, very frequently, getting decent end cards.
I think looking at winning lineups, particularly in rare and limited, and thinking like studying winning lineups, like podium lineups, and being like, that's how you do it, is really dangerous because certainly for limited and rare, there's just so much randomness and luck. And so you can go in and be like, oh yeah, I just need 5 guys who do this, or I don't need to. I always play 2 midfielders because I saw that podiums like every week, game week is different. Correct. And yeah, there's just like, I think the more you play so rare, the more you understand what makes a good lineup, and you'll see bad lineups win. Like it happens.
Correct.
We see it in DFS all the time, and people think they're really good because they win $100,000 on an absolutely moronic lineup, Sorry for being the first one to say moron on the show. And they think they're good. And usually that's actually really good for the DFS community because they keep playing, but we don't necessarily have that in Sorare. But the studying like good lineups or studying lineups and understanding what makes a good lineup, you look at the people who play a lot of lineups, Sean, Nanzo, and look at how they build lineups, and you realize like, okay, if you can understand why they built the lineups that they did, you can understand why they think they're competitive in some lineups and where they think they can improve, and you just go from there.
Correct. And a lot of that is done over time, right? Like I've told you, and it happened this week. I told you my U23 super forwards are really, really weak. And it forces me to just not use any U23 super forwards, which forces me into like mid and defender super rares in U23 rare pro. And so I went out and bought a couple. And I bought a couple to fill that gap. And I was able to play Daku this weekend in U23 rare pro as a super rare, which freed me up to run Joey Veerman rare in that lineup, which maybe I wouldn't have been able to run previously because I would have had to run like a Reinders super rare or something instead. Arsenal Dude asked, why does Limited Pro exist? I don't know. We always thought that they were going to end up having Limited Pro, but then never did. I don't have like a good explanation for it other than they just haven't done it.
I'm moving forward as if it'll never happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. I'm moving forward as if like, I don't know.
If I thought Limited Pro was going to happen, I would have kept my Limiteds.
Blue Tomatoes asks, how would you rate the SorareData lineup build suggestions then? I wonder if Vitali is in the chat because he would probably be interested in this answer. But Laird, what do you think my answer is going to be?
I think you would say it's like, my guess is you don't use it at all. But my other thought was maybe you use it just as like a, hey, what does it come up with? And then you just do it yourself.
So my answer is I've never used it once, but that's because I also think I'm way better than it at creating lineups. Some people are not. Like I've talked to some people that it's like, you are horrendous at building lineups.
No, you should definitely use them.
this thing is something you should use. So here's my opinion on it, Blue Tomatoes. If you are good at creating lineups, and I'm going to use percentages, even though it doesn't really make sense. So like, let's say that I'm really good at creating lineups and really good at using my roster and knowing what my roster is to create a lineup. And you will make a lineup 65% of the time better than the lineups provided due to the SorareData lineup suggestion tool. However, let's say that you're not as good with lineups and you're like going to make lineups that are 55% better than what the SorareData lineup projection tool does. But let's say it takes you 3 hours to build your lineups. You can do it in 5 minutes. So is it worth like giving up 5% to save 3 hours of your life? Very good possibility that it is the case. It just depends on what you want to do. Like you know the ins and outs on your gallery. The SorareData lineup builder is a robot effectively. It can't read things. So like, for example, if I was building stuff for this upcoming weekend, let me see what's out there for this weekend. But like Carlos Gil, the robot might be like Carlos Gil is expected to be in 100% of lineups by people, and they might not know it. But in reality, we know Carlos Gil has an injury. Do I really want to risk the Carlos Gil injury? Or like this midweek, a good example of like what's going on in the midweek. Like I have a bunch of cards in my gallery for like U23 Rare Pro, but like I have no idea who's going to actually play in a game. So like I'm looking at it and like my gallery, like I have Loic Beatty in my gallery. He's 92% to start. Well, he just started as a sub this weekend. Do I really believe that it's 92%? Probably not. Like I might think it's a lower percentage, or I might think it's higher percentage, depending on what it is. So it's a situation where you have to understand some nuances that the robot isn't gonna understand.
The robot.
What?
The robot.
Yeah, we should just call it the robot. But anyways, there's a lot of different nuances that you as a human can know that it cannot know. So it's something that I definitely. So I will say I use the pick score quite a bit in regards to creating cat mode lamps. I don't use it much at all for non-cat mode lamps. I use the Vegas odds on everything, and the actual matchups that were happening. I don't care enough about the pick score because I don't think the pick score is ever going to be as precise as it would need to be for me to look at things from a Vegas perspective and see who's going to be a dominant team, who's going to dominate possession and stuff like that.
Yeah, part of me sometimes wishes I could adjust the pick score on my own.
Yeah, so the good place says that what holds the suggestion tool back is that people spam the wrong projections, what often includes or excludes players should play that the tool will ignore due to low starting strength. That's not even necessarily wrong. It's just like the way that the Sorare lineup projection tool works is it's like an indicator of like this guy may not start. So I'll give an example that Laird and I have this week. So Laird, do you think Paulo Diaz is starting in the midweek?
Maybe.
And he is 69% bench per lineup projection. So what that means is that I need to do more research on the situation and see if Paulo Diaz is going to likely play. And if not, I need to figure out who makes the most sense to plug into that spot. So it's not necessarily that. It's a situation where you need to just sort of be able to use factors. Like a bot and a model is something that you need to be able to use, but also manually edit. And something from DFS, like people that create models and don't know how to manually edit or manually figure things out really struggle to stay relevant long term, because there's eventually going to be errors with your model or the system that if you don't know how to manually correct them, it will cause an issue. So Jonathan B just said Paulo Diaz is starting, Mamon is injured, and LGP is suspended. There you go. So this guy, Paulo Diaz, is 69% to start. However, if you look at his projections, he's 31% to start, 69% not to. But Jonathan just gave us some very, very good reasons why he should start. So now all of a sudden I'm sitting here thinking, before this show started, I was like, all right, it's about a third that he's going to start, 2/3 he's not going to start. I'm going to look into it more. I just looked into it more thanks to Jonathan doing the work for me.
So you didn't look at all.
No, and now what
are you looking
at? And now I am looking at Paulo Diaz, and I'm like, all right, Paulo Diaz is probably 80-90% to start. So, like, for example, the projected line or the suggested lineup builder might not use him because it expects him out. Whereas, like, I now think there's a pretty high probability that he's going to be in, and I can therefore play him. And if worse comes to worse, I just blame Jonathan on Thursday when he was out of the lineup on Tuesday or Wednesday, right?
I'll say two things on this. One, the projected lineup percentage is always the best close to the deadline. So I realize that it's like the deadline is tomorrow, but we have time for some stuff to come out. So people will figure that out as it goes on. The other was, what the hell was the other thing? The whole Paulo Diaz talk started making me get excited because I was playing him anyway. So people spamming wrong projections. We changed the scoring for the game recently there, and for the algorithm that says whether we think somebody will start or not. That if you're consistently wrong, like if you're somebody who spams incorrect projections, we won't take that into account. So it's basically a way to stop people from doing it, because it won't show up anywhere in the lineup builder. That the people who are guessing now for Paulo are they probably did it before he came back yesterday, or was that yesterday? Yeah, yesterday, and haven't gone back and changed it. Like there are reasons for this, and so it could change drastically before the deadline anyway.
Yeah. Also, so Nanzo brings up another good topic that we will. This is like the number one most important thing on Sorare, and has been, and people do not understand it. Avoiding DNPs is one of the underrated skills when it comes to competing with a large gallery. I don't even think it's one of the underrated skills. I think it's by far the most important skill. If you run DNPs and you get a 0, you lose. Like, yes, sure, you can rip 400s and maybe get a reward or something, but you lose. Surf has discussed it earlier today. If you're running 5 guys out and all 5 of those guys start, your lineup's live to get a reward, because every single player on the field is possible to get a decisive. Like, even the worst players still probably have like a 10 to 15% chance to get a decisive, because it just can happen. Like they can get a goal line clearance or pass the ball to someone and that person dribbles 80 yards and scores, right? Like there are just ways for them to get decisive, even if they're not super involved offensively or defensively. And that is the main factor, is like you have to avoid DNPs. However, if you have a bigger gallery and sometimes you look at your lineup, sometimes taking a risk with a player is better than playing like a known DNP, or not like a known DNP, but like taking a risk is better than playing someone you know is going to start, because the guy you know is going to start pretty mediocre, and the guy that you're risking, if he does start, is like a smash play. So like I will say, if you guys are out there, and this, I don't care if this is a big gallery or small gallery thing, unless you're running like one lineup, then obviously you don't have a chance. But if you are consistently getting DNPs in your key lineups, you are doing things absurdly wrong.
I'm like about to call someone out, but I don't really, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Okay.
We have a mutual friend who was convinced, I don't actually know how many lineups he played with him, but I think it was before the season. And he was like, I'm going to run Ansu Fati. And you and I were like, you should not do that. And you were like, yeah, but when he plays, he's really good. And we're like, yeah, but like when he plays, or he does not play more often than he plays. And so if you're going to run him all the time, you're murdering most of your lineups that you have him in. And so like avoiding DNP, there are two ways to avoid DNPs. One is to just not play guys who don't always play.
Yeah.
Like I know it's exciting, he was exciting, or guys who are questionable. And we've talked about this before. I think it was probably more on the topic of like how you do your lineups and everything. But I know that you are very cautious when it comes to guys who are questionable play.
I have actually gotten less cautious.
Okay.
Less cautious, but like,
but not in key lineups, you won't do it.
No. I've still gotten less cautious. Like I played Melly in my U23 Rare Pro, and Melly was not certain this game week.
I mean, he was like 98 versus 100, but you're right.
No, I mean, he left last game injured at 84 minutes.
Yeah, it wasn't injury though. He just left and Opta decided he was injured, right?
It was a cramp at the end of the game, but I couldn't find it. I couldn't find the info.
Yeah.
So
okay. That's fair.
He was,
but that is one thing that people are like, correct. Man, I can't believe I ate that DNP of a guy who was like 50-50 to play. And it's like, you need to believe that and why it happened before you can get better, because that's the risk you took. And they're like, well, it's a risk. I'll just take the risk. But like, if you're taking a risk and it doesn't work out, that's on you. That's not on anything else.
Correct. I would say like my U20, my like key lineups, right? I probably take a DNP once every like 3 or 4 months in like all of them combined. Because like you just shouldn't, if you are constantly, and I'm saying like if you're taking a DNP like once every couple weeks in a key lineup that you're prioritizing, you're doing things wrong. Because it's just something where you should not be risking your best players with a guy that's not going to play. No, don't get me wrong. Like a random DNP is going to happen. Like, so for example, like Teddy Tuma yesterday got injured during warmups and he left. That happens. If that happens, I don't even count it. Like, right. Like if someone gets injured in warmups, or like you had no idea, like if you sit there and you play like an MLS guy and you had no idea they didn't travel, because obviously MLS reporting is horrendous, that doesn't count.
Shout out to Jefferson Savarino, by the way.
Like if I'm sitting here tomorrow, like, right? Like, so I have Paulo Diaz in the line. If I sit there and I'm complaining because Paulo Diaz wasn't in the lineup when he was like 50-50 to start, I shouldn't do that, right? Like it's also midweeks don't really count, because midweeks are like, I got to play whatever I have to play to make things work type of thing in the midweek. So like, I wouldn't really necessarily count midweeks. I just am sort of talking weekends things. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like if you're sitting there and you're running a priority lineup of yours and you're sitting there like looking at your gallery, like, I don't know, let me pull up this upcoming weekend here and see someone that I know. It's actually a great time to talk about this because it's the end of the season, right? It's a time of the season where a lot of people are not going to give many shits. So like if I'm sitting here looking at my lineups this weekend, I have Douglas Santos. Am I going to fire up Douglas Santos with absolutely nothing to play for and all the other Brazilians off on vacation in my priority lineup? No, probably not, because he's a major risk. Another good example. Am I going to sit there and fire Carlos Gil in Gas 3 this weekend? if there wasn't a suspension that we heard about from Mike Bass earlier today.
Right.
No, probably
that we looked up. We did our own research and
we
found
did our own research of looking at what Mike Basson said, and he said he's suspended. So it's a thing where like you should not be taking risk with guys if you can avoid it. Sometimes there's no option. Like, so another example, like, am I going to sit there this weekend and I have, let's say, I know Malcolm's gone and I know he's like not there right now, but like pretend I didn't know Malcolm was already on vacation and like Malcolm could play. Am I going to play Malcolm or am I going to play like, I don't know, like Taisei Miyashiro, who's just not very good? I might just play Malcolm because it makes more sense to take a risk, because if the risk pays off, I'm a lot more likely to upside, when if like I play Miyashiro, I'm just not going to hit that anyways. So sometimes risk is important. Sometimes you need to avoid it.
Yeah. So I just looked it up. I think that was Carlos Hill's first yellow of the season. So I don't know why we think
Mike Baston. Oh my God, you're leading us astray, Mike Baston.
But the other thing is that in that situation that you just described, I don't want to say you're making, you know, like you're choosing to make a less competitive lineup because there's a good possibility that whoever it was, who was it, Douglas Santos or Malcolm, whoever, like,
yeah,
there's a decent chance those guys are not going to play. So it's not like you're taking two guys who are equal and like they're both going to play, and you're like, I'm going to take the worst guy, but like you're taking a guy who is more likely to play. Like that is high on your list of things that you consider for each player. And I think that there are not enough people who do that, and therefore they're not competing because they're choosing to take this. Oh, well, this guy is obviously better, and it's like, well, do you think he's playing? And it's like, probably. And so then it doesn't work. And Nance's saying Malcolm's already in Brazil.
Yeah, I knew he was gone. I knew him and Wendell were gone. I don't know why Douglas Santos didn't go. So actually, you're also wrong. You and Mike Basson were both wrong. Mike Basson would have told us afterwards and before the deadline, but he actually has that was his second yellow card of the season. So no suspension. You were wrong, and Mike Basson were wrong.
Yeah. When was the first one?
What?
When was the first one?
Columbus on the 14th to 18th, game week 363.
Interesting.
It's right on the SorareData page, Laird, if you want to take a look.
Yeah, I'm actually wondering if they overturned it. But anyway, it doesn't.
Oh, anyways. So Kevin asked, if a player's injured or out of favor, I'll leave him out of a team until I see him back in the team. Would rather take the hit of one game he doesn't play instead of X amount of games before it. So I'll throw a counterpoint to that, Kevin. I think you could not see him play for a couple games. I mean, a good example of someone I have coming up is Emmanuel Reynoso for Minnesota. Assuming I don't get info about it beforehand, if I get info, like obviously I would change it, but assuming I'd get no info before it, I would not play Reynoso until at least one start, maybe two, in a priority lineup. If I know he's going to be back in the squad, like I'll play him in a cap mode, but I wouldn't play him in a priority lineup until I'm positive he's going to be back.
I think, man, that's such a, it's not even that unique of a situation, but I think that is something that it's one of those where people are going to hear like he's back, he's available this week, and then he like comes off the bench and they're like, oh, I can't believe it. And it's like that, you should be prepared for that. So like those are situations where you need to know the risk beforehand. And if it doesn't work out, sometimes the risk doesn't work out and you need to know that.
Yeah. Jonathan said that he knows this is a SorareData show, but everyone should also use Play Sharper. So I would agree. I think using both is a good way to sort of determine things. So for example, like SorareData is getting stuff from 100 different people per se on a given player each week. So if there's some info out there on someone and 15 people know it instead of out of the 100, you still might get alerted to it, right? Whereas Play Sharper is one person who is probably more in tune with that team than others, and therefore like they might see things. If you're only using one, I would recommend using the SorareData tool because it just is a lot more all-encompassing, gives you ideas better. Whereas the Play Sharper thing is just one person telling you what a projected lineup is. Like I could tell you projected lineup for most teams and leagues that I follow. Like I could tell you a projected lineup for like Belgium, the Netherlands, the MLS pretty consistently. But I would still recommend using the SorareData stuff over over the Play Sharper from just that perspective. But using both is a great option, because if you can sit there and bounce between each other and look and be like, all right, SorareData has this guy at 65% and Play Sharper has him at 95%, Play Sharper's probably wrong. So if you're looking at Play Sharper and only looking at Play Sharper, you're probably going to miss it. If you're looking at both, you'll probably catch it. Similar on the other side of things, if Play Sharper has someone at like 95% and SorareData has something at like 80, you can look at it and maybe Play Sharper has a bit more information, and therefore they have a bit more clarity on the situation and are sure the guy's going to play. So I think you want to use both of the tools to your advantage, and not just use one most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, there are plenty of resources out there to make, like, I think you should be able to go into every game week knowing exactly which players you're fully expecting to play and which won't.
Correct.
Like, I think that's one of those things that you realize when you're starting to compete.
Correct.
Do you think more people get into U23 when they shouldn't, because they start, like, they win a U23 reward and then they get in and they're like, oh, I have a card, or I have two, maybe I'll go get some and I'll just try to play that?
I think people are interested by U23, and I think people like the idea of U23 people. I mean, I think this goes back to the topic of the conversation today, that let's look at your lineup versus my lineup this week. So for you have literally told me I'm not playing U23. It is word for word, like verbatim, that has come out of your mouth, correct?
I said I don't play U23 anymore.
Correct. And then this week, Laird played U23 and had a pretty good score. I
played U23 Rare and Rare Pro.
Wow, you were just all out there playing U23 competition.
Yeah, so, I'm like Harry Trades up in here.
You apparently no. Harry Trades now plays a bunch of old people, so
he does.
You guys have worn off on each other, I guess.
Yeah.
But so, like, this is where we'll talk about from a competitive lineup versus a non-competitive lineup thing. So let's look at Laird versus my lineup in U23 Rare Pro this weekend.
Hold on, I just put us into a watch list together, and we can see exactly how we played each one.
So Bouncy just asked, do you think you can compete in Rare with a 0.6 gallery? Bouncy, I don't think you can compete in Rare with a 200 ETH gallery. Compete, the capitalized misspelled version of the word. You can compete and get like some tier 4s, tier 5s. So we'll go through with lineup. So first off, we're going to start with Laird's lineup because I think it makes more sense from Laird's lineup. So he competed, right? So Laird has like 2 U23 goalies, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In order to compete, you need to have like 10 to 15 goalies, so you can always have someone that is a very big favorite in a reasonably good spot. That is the idea to compete, in my opinion, at goalie.
I mean, you realize how absurd that sounds, right?
But am I wrong?
Like, you're telling everyone they need 10 to 15 under 23 goalkeepers.
Okay, 6 to 8.
Okay.
To compete for
this is compete for podiums.
To compete for
tier 1s.
What?
Tier 1s and up.
Yeah, to compete
every game week.
To compete week in, week out for tier 1 pluses, you need 6 to 8 U23 goalies, so that you almost always will have reasonably high-end favorites that are good to play. Now, that's not saying you can't compete at a high end on a week. For example, Laird has Bake John Bum, or whatever his name is. I just call him Bake.
Yep.
Is it Bake John Bum?
Yep.
Okay. So he has Bake John Bum from Seoul. If FC Seoul has a really favorable lineup or really favorable matchup for the weekend, I would consider that as a competitive goalie going for a win, right? So this weekend, I think Seoul had a really good matchup, right?
It was okay. Yeah. Home against Jeju, I believe.
So in terms of that, Laird passed the compete tab. But if he didn't, he just would have been competing and he would be trying to get something and something else as well. So next up, we're just going to talk about Melly Muhlenstein, because and then we'll go back to the other parts. So Melly has been fantastic since they moved to him to DM, been like unreal good. And he's been just absolutely smashing good spots. So like in order to compete on a week-to-week basis, you got to have quite a few defender options that you can run out there depending on matchups. Now, like you guys are looking at this and you're like, Melly Muhlenstein. Some of you might be like, who the hell is that? Some of you guys are like, yeah, Melly's been great, but like he's not really competitive. He's a guy that like on a certain week, like maybe 10 to 15% of the time, Melly is a high-end player. So like this week, I looked at my gallery and I have like 100 U23 defenders. Melly Muhlenstein was the number one guy to me this week. So like that is why I played Melly there, and Laird similarly, and obviously as you see, he captained him, so he clearly thought pretty highly of Melly Muhlenstein this week. All right, next up, I have Joey Veerman, and Laird has Korean Timber. So again, this goes to the thing with Bake, which is why it is a good thing that he has both of them. If FC Seoul has a really, really favorable matchup, both of those guys pass the compete test, right? Whereas if they don't have a good matchup, then Laird's just out there. He's hoping they put up a good score. He's trying to get a card. No big deal. All right. I had Veerman. Veerman, again, thought was a great play this week. Thought he had a pretty good chance to put up a major score. Obviously did. Next, I had Jeremy Doku. Obviously, he's been on fire. Had to buy into some hype there. Laird made fun of me for it, but it paid off. So go me. But like Doku is a guy that like I wouldn't consider him like a guy I'm playing every single week there, but he's a guy that I can definitely run in a good matchup, and they had a very favorable matchup this weekend. Big Lube. So Laird had Lubicic. This is where I would say Laird was just competing. Laird isn't sitting there like expecting big Lubes to rip off an 80 to 90 most of the time. Plus, he had some DNP risk. He could have just not played because it was they've already clinched and they're not
really done. Yeah.
So like that part is like a compete / risk card that Laird has to take because he doesn't really have many options. So like he has to take a risk instead of another option. And then I have Mbappe. I mean, and Laird has. Who do you even have?
Dwight McNeil, the GOAT.
Oh, Dwight McNeil's actually been really good for Everton.
Yeah, he has.
That's actually pretty.
Who do you have? Such disrespect.
Yeah. So, anyways, like
shout out to looking up with Laird. Also, this was a Harry Trades call on that show.
See, there you go. So Harry Trades was getting, or you're looking up with Laird got pooped on, but you just proved him wrong right there. So like, yeah, like you look at McNeil. Like if McNeil's not playing a super high end team, you feel okay playing him in a decent line. And even then, like I mean, he put up 65 with no decisive against Man City away. Like
69, Sean, 9. 69.
But so anyways, this is like if you look at these two lineups, right, on a week in, week out basis, Laird is competing. He's just trying to get a card. If he gets a tier 2, tier 3, he's pretty happy about that. That's what he's trying to do with this lineup. Also, like based on that, like this lineup probably costs Laird 1.25 ETH right now.
Like what it would cost now?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, over time it's been different, but like I'm guessing like
it's probably like, around there.
Yeah, so like 1.25. Whereas my lineup's probably costing me like 5.
Mm-hmm.
So like in theory, like so I'm putting out a compete lineup where I'm trying to compete, get podiums. Laird is putting out a compete lineup. He's hoping to get a card. If he can get a card, he can he'll be happy. Tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. He's cool. I'm like, all right, I really want to get a top 5 here. That's what I'm going for. But so the difference is, right, it's like Laird's lineup costs a quarter of what my lineup costs. So if I win Mbappe here, Laird's gallery is still from a perspective of how much it costs to how much he returned. It's going to be a cheaper investment. So like it's one of those things. And like all of a sudden, like who's to say here that if Bake didn't concede, I think you're like right up there, right with me, right? You're like
the worst part.
What?
So the worst part is that it appeared as if Opta doesn't send K-League stats all at once. It's like they update throughout the game. So at one point, my lineup showed that he had a clean sheet. Nice. And I was like, I knew that they didn't get one, but I still saw it. Like, yeah, I was at like 4. I actually wasn't remotely close to you still, but I was at like 450 or something like that. And it was just so great. Actually, what was interesting is that Lee Hanbum was less. He was in like at 79. He must have had like a ton of stuff at the end, but like I knew it was coming. But like I think I got a 98th percentile finish out of this lineup. Like I can't expect much more out of that lineup.
Yeah.
So it's not like I submitted this one being like, yeah, I can score 500, which wouldn't have even won me first place anyway, thanks to Mamba this week, my guy.
Yeah, so yeah, Ron Romero just asked how far away I was from first place. I was 65 points away from first place.
This was like one of the most unbelievable scores I've seen.
Yeah, Mamba. It was even funny because like if Mbappe put up 100, I lost more points off of where I was at. So I needed Donnarumma to get me like
Pranksy in the
yeah, look at that. I needed to get like 90 out of Donnarumma, I think. Something like that.
Yeah, 547.87 was first.
Maybe I needed less, I don't know. But like I needed so many points to get there. But I had a shot. If Donnarumma didn't concede, I had a shot.
Yeah.
It would have been even better if like so Mbappe had a goal that was disallowed like right before the end, and literally last touch of the game was him with a BCM.
But he had Mbappe too, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, he actually his is a better version. He has more XP than I do. So every point Mbappe scored, I was losing fractionally.
Yeah. No, this is like an absolutely absurd score.
Yeah, his score was quite absurd. And it was difficult. Yeah, because so like he got like 100 out of his super rare. I got 76.
Gertrude didn't even have a clean sheet.
No, he got an assist at the end too. I wish he didn't get the assist at the end. It would have been actually. I'm glad he got the assist in the end because I would have been tilting Donnarumma sucking way harder.
Yeah, it was just an absurd one.
But anyways, yeah. So like, there's just difference between competing and like competing, and that's where if you are. And this isn't to say you need like a massive gallery to compete in a certain area, because like you could have a 5 ETH gallery easily and compete in any lineup.
I like this comment from Mike Basson. You weren't competing if you were expecting 90 from Donnarumma.
I wasn't expecting it, but I will say that if you gave me a goalie on the platform and told me like if you said like you need to get 90 from a goalie, he'd probably be the top guy I take, because he faced enough turd box shots, and they could also have a pretty reasonable chance at keeping a clean sheet. So like Donnarumma's AA is typically pretty good, and he has reasonable upside to get there. So like, if you told me I needed 90 for someone, that's probably the guy I'd want in net. With his 5th air on the season, by the way.
He what?
His 5th air on the season. But yeah, you look at it, like he's got 82, 100, 85, 88, 81, 87, 93. Like that for a goalie in your last 40, having like 5 games above 80, like that's pretty strong.
Yeah.
So like if you told me I needed 80 plus points from a goalie, I probably would take him. I'd probably take, well, for U23 I've taken. If you gave me like a non U23, I'd probably take like Mignon, because I feel like Mignon gets quite a bit of good AA. And Ron said PSG can't keep a clean sheet. I can confirm that is true.
9 in his last 40 for PSG.
Like what did you like? I mean, go look. What did you run in All-Star Rare Pro this weekend? I literally don't know, but I'm guessing you ran Armani, Paulo Diaz, and then you probably ran Carlos Gil, Tadic, and a super rare.
No, I ran Enzo.
Messi. Okay. So like, if people look at this, right, this lineup is competing on a weekend where if River Plate hold a clean sheet, this lineup is very theoretically in play to like win.
They were big favorites in this one.
They were decent sized favorite in this game. So like, this is what I'm talking about. Like this lineup didn't cost Laird tons from those 3 perspectives. So like, you don't need Messi. You could have that replaced by someone else similar to like Tadic, right? And then that lineup's not like a 5 ETH lineup. It's like a 2 ETH lineup or a 1 ETH lineup. So like you can compete a lot cheaper than
there's Gil.
Some people think. 375, and you're like light years off tier 1.
Well, if my captain didn't get injured and then a yellow card on the bench.
You should maybe not kiss of death him. Sopsy asked when the collections start. I actually have no idea when collection scores start.
May 25th. They start next game week. Like not the midweek, but like this coming week.
So Sopsy also said, but surely competing means you will need collections in the future. No, not at all. I don't think it's that impactful. In limited, it's more so, I guess. But like, I lost by 65 points to Mamba. It doesn't matter what the collection score was. I wasn't catching Mamba. But we've
It's
talked
such
about
a
it.
ridiculous amount of points.
It is, but like actually, it's funny is I think Irwan put up the same amount of points the week before, or very close. But getting to 2% is pretty simple. Getting to 5 is like incredibly hard as it is. So like you're talking a difference of like 1 or 2%. So you're talking maybe like a 3 to 5 point difference at the end of the week. It in theory matters to some extent, but also doesn't. Like it's not going to turn a lineup that's a complete turd into a lineup that's competing for a podium, right? And it's not going to, if you don't have it, it's not going to turn a lineup that was competing for a podium into one that is a steaming pile of poop. Like it doesn't fully do that.
There's just never going to be a time where you are looking at a lineup and being like, man, I really should have bought that other rare for 0.02 so that I could get an extra % on this one card. Like it's just, we're never going to think about it because we never think about it. Nobody ever looks at their XP and they're like, man, I should have boosted this card. Like it's all after, it's not before. And it's just
and it couldn't be impactful, right? Like it's all on the week. Like if I lost to Mamba by 2 points and I'm like, oh, that 2 points would have got me Mbappe over whoever, then you're going to be like, yeah, that sucks. But at the same time, like, I just don't think it's going to be worth going out and buying 20 cards to make that happen.
Yeah, I think people will also completely ignore that. Like, oh, I should have gotten this for the collection, but you look and like the other guy doesn't have the collection either. So it's like, if actually, he could have also done it. So
here's a hilarious question for you. And I literally chuckled because this was a pure, like, LOL me caring about collections part of things. Who do you think are my top? I don't even care about the first two. Who do you think is my third biggest collection on the platform? It is hilarious. And by the way, I could give you 150 guesses. You wouldn't get it.
Chicago Fire.
Nope.
Oh. Marinos?
So first is 2021 Ajax. That's first. Second is rare. These are all rare, I think. Well, the first three are rare. The second, the third one, fourth one is super rare. Next up is Kashima Antlers 2020. Okay. My third biggest collection is Schalke 2019. I don't even know who I have in my gallery from that team. I have no idea. I had no clue.
You have 5 or 4 number ones.
Yeah.
That's why.
No, I had no clue.
I believe that.
Yep, had no idea whatsoever. You would actually think Gank would be up there, but Gank's not even that high.
I think you have too many mixed scarcities. That's why.
Yeah, but I mean, I have a lot of Gank cards in general. The rare and super.
It doesn't matter. That's the problem with these. It doesn't matter how many cards you have. They have to be the same year and scarcity.
Yeah. Ron Romero guessed Gank, and it was a good guess, Ron. Like, that's definitely a good guess. Look at my Marino's unique getting 2% Laird.
Why is this Barcelona one so high? Only owner.
It's a rookie card of Gavi.
Oh, rookie Gavi. There you go. You were so pissed when you won that one too.
Yeah, I should have sold it. What could I got? Like 2.5 at one point?
For Gavi?
I held for that rookie card, Laird. I held it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine holding it for until.
But yeah, like I mean, I think there's this. We've had people complain about like talking about like, oh, PSU wants to win. Yeah, like, I'm out here to win. I'm out here to win podiums. I'm not out here to collect a tier 4 in All-Star Rare. Like that's not what I'm trying to do. Like if you
Max Verstappen of Sorare football.
Yeah, if you spent as much as me on the platform, like that can't be your objective. If that's your objective and you spend as much as I have, like you're screwed. Similarly, like if you're expecting to podium everything and you're not investing and you're not putting in the effort to get there, you also like shouldn't expect that. But if you put in 5 ETH and you're hoping to win tier 3s and tier 4s, that goes a long way because a tier 3, tier 4 could be worth like 0.05 ETH. All of a sudden you get a couple thresholds out of it. Like you're starting to generate quite a bit that way. So,
and even those lineups can, if like the luck is on your side that game week, you can sneak into a tier 2 or a tier 1.
We've talked about every single player is live to get a clean sheet. Every single one. Does not matter who it is. They probably have at least a 10% chance to get decisive if they're in the starting lineup. Because,
and frankly, like the great thing about Sorare, like it's not just goals and assists. Correct. You can have somebody who gets his goal line clearance or last man tackle, and that completely moves you up the chain without even thinking about it.
Correct. So like you all of a sudden, like you get 5 guys in your lineup to put up 75 points apiece. All of a sudden, you're right up there collecting ETH, getting results. No matter where you're playing, like if you put up 75 apiece, you're
For sure.
competing to some extent.
Yeah.
Except for limiteds, like limiteds, I don't think you'll really get up there in that. But you're still getting a card, like you're getting a reasonable card. So I think people, it's more about having realistic expectations and having a good viewpoint on things, I guess, and trying to do things that way.
Definitely. Before we go, somebody brought this up. Oh man, this is like so far back in the chat. So I'm not even going to give credit to whoever asked this or said this, but they were like, why would you start getting rares? Because rares and limiteds have the same XP bonus. And the difference is that you cannot win rares with limiteds anymore. Can you?
I
guess in cap you can. But like for the most part, that's the difference.
What?
Like all rare competitions, you can win either rares or super rares.
Yeah.
They were saying like, why would I get rares? Because there's no XP difference between rares and limiteds, like there are with super rares and uniques. Like how super rares have 20% over rares.
Yeah.
Rares don't have anything above limiteds.
Oh, are we talking about like the academy?
I mean, it applies there as well. Yes.
Well, the academy, you can just buy limited legends.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I think they'll
probably don't even need them.
I think they'll. Yeah, we'll see.
Thank you everybody for joining us. I'm not even going to let you go. If you guys can please hit the like button on the video, that'd be very appreciated. Subscribe to the channel as well. Maxime and I will be back here on YouTube tomorrow for office hours, and then Sorare Andrews later in the week, and then what is my show name? Off Topic. There we go. Off Topic as well. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining us. And Sean, I appreciate you just giving up on that and not making me actually cut you off by ending the stream. All right.